Welcome to Saltier Politics. Today we have a wonderful conversation for World Pride 2019. We talked to my friend Kacey Martin. She's a lawyer. She owns this really cool company, Gender Traitor, and she is an interesting woman. She went to Liberty University and went through conversion therapy, not once but twice. She talks about all that here, and she's also a conservative. We get into it. We have a great conversation, and I'm really excited, Julie, for everybody to be a part of it.
I am as well. Tweet us back at Saltier Politics, Politics Saltier, and let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you. Happy Pride.
This week, I'm very excited. We have my friend Kacey Martin on. She is a lawyer by day and the owner of Gender Traitor Shop by night. And Kacey can tell you more about it. But Julie, I'm really excited to have Kacey on because this is Pride Month, and Kacey is an interesting case. She is a lawyer. She is a Republican. She is religious and also a lesbian. So
quite the anomaly.
Right. So I'm excited for you guys to meet and to kind of talk about her journey. She went to Liberty University, both for undergrad and law school, and has been through conversion therapy twice.
So tell us that story, because Liberty, for those people who don't know, was founded by Jerry Falwell Sr., right, Kacey?
Yes.
It's actually in a beautiful part of Virginia. I've been there. It's a stunning campus, but certainly quite conservative, still run by evangelical Christians. And I assume, knowing that there are many things you can't do, like drink on campus, smoke, certainly I assume engage in premarital sex, regardless of your orientation. So did they make you undergo conversion therapy, or how did that work?
Yeah, so the second time that I underwent conversion therapy was while I was at Liberty. I actually knew I was gay before I went to Liberty, but I was essentially told that I couldn't go to Liberty if I was gay.
Right.
So it was almost like go to the college that you've been accepted to and have a scholarship to, or be gay. So I kind of had a mentality of, okay, maybe I can, be fixed, I guess, by this school of, in my mind, normal people. And by the time I was in my junior year, it became pretty apparent that I wasn't going to be fixed or changed. So I started to slowly come out to a few people on my hall that I thought I could trust. And then I got called in by my RA, and they sat me down and they said, listen, we've heard that you are attracted to women. And I said, that is true, yes. And they said, okay, well, you're aware that that's a violation of what's called the Liberty Way, or their code of conduct. And I was like, yes, I'm aware of that. And they said, okay, well, we don't want to punish you. We want to help you. So instead of giving you reprimands and a $500 fine, which was the punishment for homosexual behavior.
Which is, for a college student, actually not just for a college student, an obscene amount of money. But,
yeah, no, it's crazy.
Right.
It's the same. It's actually the same amount that you would get fined if you had an abortion or practiced witchcraft.
Wow.
So that's a real thing. They said, we're just going to send you to therapy here on campus, and once you complete a certain number of sessions and we feel like you're headed on the right track, then you won't have to go anymore. So that's when the second round of conversion therapy started.
And what's conversion therapy entail? What does that mean?
So I think a lot of people think of conversion therapy as kind of like, if you've seen the Miseducation of Cameron Post, where it's like they show you pictures of penises and like, well, wait till you get sexually aroused by the penis and then you're no longer a lesbian. I think that these days it's definitely shifted from that, because I think even the strongest evangelical Christian would admit that's insane. So the experience that I had was very, like I said, pray the gay away. We sat there, he, ironically, a man, referenced scripture, basically asked me to defend my sexuality and support it by scripture, was quoting the Bible with me, was telling me that this isn't what God wants from me. God didn't make me this way. God doesn't make mistakes. He made me how I am, but this is sin that's coming into my life. The whole hate the sin, love the sinner, just constantly, if you pray, God will change you. God can change your heart kind of thing.
And did Was this one-on-one, or were there other people there?
Mine was one-on-one. I have a close friend who underwent a similar experience, but it was in a group setting, so it can really go either way. They had group settings available, and they offered it to me, which I always think is really funny because nothing will make you gayer than putting you in a room full of other lesbians who are also struggling.
No,
with
it's like,
their
great, now I know who the other gays are on campus.
No, exactly. It's like just wear a rainbow flag on our chest, like we're identifying each other. But mine was one-on-one.
Was there a commiseration? I mean, among other gay men or lesbians who you must have run into on campus, did you guys commiserate about the situation that you were in, or was it not discussed, or how did that work?
So that's one of the most disheartening things. I was literally the only gay person I knew on the whole campus. So, and I am sure that's not true, obviously.
Right.
But in my eyes, I was kind of very much alone, even though I ended up meeting one of my significant girlfriends my junior year recently after the conversion therapy failed. But it wasn't like there was this underground kind of gay community where we could band together. It was very much isolated.
And did you grow up in an evangelical household?
I did, yeah. My family is actually very good friends with the Falwells, and both of my parents went to Liberty, which is how it was kind of pre-selected for me, which also made coming out on campus that much harder, because it wasn't just I was some student who was gay. It was, oh, this is like the Falwell's best friend who's a lesbian.
Right. Yeah. You know, what I find interesting about this whole situation is that certainly never having gone through anything like that, but it would seem to me that if you grow up with that imbued into you from day one, obviously, and you grow up in a very religious household, which is fine, and then you go to a school that buttresses everything that you've grown up believing. And I'm sure you probably agreed with everything else going on at the school. I assume you probably grew up in a religious, you yourself maybe were religious by the time you got there, or believed what they were teaching. And then was your attitude about this whole conversion therapy, was it rebellious, or did you actually really try to pray the gay away?
Yes to both of those things. So I think, again, when I first started at Liberty, I really thought I could change, and I really wanted to change. I wanted to just be normal. I saw all the girls on campus holding hands with the boys, going home to meet the parents, and I just wanted to fit in. I just always felt so odd for so long. I mean, I knew I was gay since I was 14. So initially, yeah, I did try to pray the gay way, and I tried to do the whole Liberty way, go to prayer meetings and all of this. And then by the time I was a junior, I just felt everything within me kind of leaking out at the seams, if you will. And that's when I just said, okay, like I like girls, and I'm just going to tell people, and whatever happens, happens. After the conversion therapy, I very much rebelled against the church. I did not consider myself to be a Christian. I hated everything to do with it. I hated God because in my mind, he did make me this way. And if he made me this way, why would he want to change me? And I just felt very kind of kicked out of the church and not wanted. Obviously, that's come full circle. I am currently a Christian, and I do consider myself to be a Christian. And that's very important to me. But initially, there was definitely a backlash that pushed me away from the church.
And what made you stay at Liberty for law school? Was it just because it was the easiest path to take, or did you still believe in everything else Liberty was espousing, and you thought that was a good place to be, or what was the reason for that?
I think by the time I had reached law school, I was in a relationship, like I said, with a woman. We were living together, and somehow in my mind, I was still trying to reconcile that interplay between faith and sexuality. And I thought, okay, I can have my kind of secret life over here with my girlfriend, and I can have my good religious life over here with my school, and the two never have to commingle, almost this church and state separation in my mind. And it really wasn't until I moved to New York that I realized you don't have to separate the two. You can be gay, and you can be a Christian, and you can be anything you want to be in this world. But I think going into law school, that was my mentality of I can do both things. I just have one hand in each cookie jar.
Do you think, now living in New York and being out, but also being a spiritual, obviously religious person, Can that coexist in the way that I'm going to use the Falwells as an example only because we're talking about liberty, but it could be the Falwells or Robert Jeffries or any of these other very prominent evangelicals. Can that coexist for them, do you think? I mean, can they accept you in their community the way you are if you subscribe to virtually everything else? Do you think there's a way to convince people that this is in fact how God made you?
I think that is going to come with time. I think that the old ways are slowly changing. Even Liberty now, I go and visit. My family still lives in Lynchburg. And when I visit, it's a totally different campus now. It's a lot more progressive than it used to be. I can guarantee you if I went there now, I would have that community of gay people to talk to. But I don't think that you're going to change the minds of people that have rooted their opinions for generations. I think that it's going to take new generations to kind of enlighten the older generation and in the same way train new generations. So I don't know if you can kind of teach an old dog new tricks, but you can certainly raise new puppies.
I have a very good friend named Bill Baroni, and he was a Republican state senator in New Jersey, very Catholic, very, very religious, and gay. And he was the only Republican when New Jersey was voting on marriage equality, going back, I want to say almost 10 years ago, if not more, to vote for marriage equality. And he was desperately worried, he wasn't out yet, he was desperately worried that he was going to be able to not be able to take communion, he was not going to be able to participate in any of the church rites that were so important to him. And again, his faith is, much like you sound, yours is very important to him. I remember having this conversation with him where he said, people keep telling me, not in so many words, to pray the gay way, but people keep telling me who know that I'm gay, why are you doing this? And you can change. And he said, don't you think that if I could, I would? That my life would be so much easier. Yeah. And I remember him saying to me, I could be president of the United States if I were straight. I mean, this was a very ambitious at the time, very prominent Republican at the time. No longer is, but what's so fascinating to me about that is to people who do say pray the gay way, it sounds to me like if, especially in a situation like yours where your entire family is so close to this culture, and you grew up this way, if you could, wouldn't you? And so I always, and I'm straight, so for me, obviously this is more of an intellectual exercise, but I struggle when people say that about others because it's not like you're choosing to make your life more difficult for yourself. I'm sure you would have loved to have had a boyfriend and hold hands with him and go meet his parents when you were 19 or 20 and go to all the stuff that, straight women and men did. But I don't grasp that. And have you ever had that discussion with people that just say to you, this is a lifestyle that you choose rather than this is how you were born and you can't fight it?
Yeah. Oh, that's the constant debate, I think. That's really the thing that holds what would be most conservatives or Republicans, however you want to identify them, back from acceptance is they do see it as a choice. They see it as a lifestyle. And I think someone actually once described it to me when I came out to them in law school. They said, well, homosexuality is different than other sins because it's the only sin that you choose to identify yourself as. I don't identify myself as a liar, but you identify yourself as a lesbian. So you're using that sin as an identification tool. So that's what makes it so different. And that breaks my heart. I've had that conversation with my mom the many times that I've tried to make her accept, how I am when I was coming out to her. She literally said that she wished I had told her I was pregnant with a drug dealer's child than to do this. And she even said, you're choosing to live a difficult life. And I said, Mom, don't you understand? I'm not choosing anything. And I used to say that a lot. I would say, don't you think if I could change, I would? Don't you think I would choose an easier life? And I think now that I've reached a point of almost acceptance and really self-love, as cliche as that sounds, to where I don't think I would change anymore. Even if, God came down and said, okay, almost this Ovid metamorphoses option of you can be straight if that's what you want. I really don't think I would choose it because I really think that there is this gap that needs to be bridged between religion or faith, spirituality, and sexuality. And I think that it's going to take people, hopefully people like me, and I know so many others that are working to bridge that gap and hopefully, blaze a trail, if you will, for people in the future.
What was the difference? You said you went to conversion therapy twice. What was the mentality as how old? 14 the first time?
Right.
And why? Why the first time at 14?
So the first time I went was because my mom found out that I was watching the L Word. And this was like 2004. The L Word was like this hot new thing, which I know it's about to be again for all the new baby lesbians out there. That's very exciting. But this was 2004. This was a brand new concept. I was just figuring out like what I was, how I felt. You know, you're 14. That's what every 14-year-old does. I was too young and stupid to delete the browser history on my computer. So I woke up one morning after my wisdom teeth had been pulled out, and my mom was sitting by my bed and said, "What's the L word?" And that turned into a conversation that I was not ready to have with my mom, who then said, if you're having these thoughts, then you need to go see a therapist. And I went. This was a therapist I had seen shortly after my parents got divorced, and it was pretty much the exact same thing as I had in college. Just here's the Bible, pray the gay away, you can change, God doesn't want this from you, etc.
But how did you feel at 14? Because 14 for anybody is an awful age, especially when it comes to sexuality. Like 8th grade, I remember in 8th, 9th grade, you're kind of coming into your body, especially as a girl. It doesn't matter what your orientation is. You're coming into your body. You're all confused. Anyway, it doesn't matter what your orientation is.
Oh, yeah.
For me, you're kind of looking at these boys who you grew up with, and now suddenly you're looking at them in a different way, and you're not really sure what the story is, and some of them are not really there yet, and some of them are much further along than you are. So it sucks to be 14. I don't care what your sexual orientation is as a girl. I can't speak to what it's like for boys, but I think for girls, it just generally, I will speak for all of womankind to say not a great time in your life, especially when it comes to sexuality of any kind. So now you're 14 years old, and on top of all the horrific stuff that you're dealing with as a 14-year-old girl, you've got to deal with something that is different from every other 14-year-old girl that you know. And your mother is telling you to go to conversion therapy. I would think that at 14, that's probably much more of a blow than it was at 19 or 20 the second time around. At least at 19 or 20, you're kind of more of a adult, though you're not fully adult, right? Was it just a worse experience, or was it, am I exaggerating that?
I think that at that time I was so unsure of everything that I kind of believed anything. It's almost that saying, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. I was 14, like you said. I was learning my body, learning these sexual desires that I'd never really experienced. And then on top of that, you're learning that any sexual desire is bad. So in my mind, having sexual desire for a woman was like twice as bad.
Right.
So I resisted therapy just because it really wasn't something I liked when I had to go because my parents were divorced. But at the same time, I think I had more of that desire to, again, be normal or change, just because on top of, I guess, the orientation pressures or whatever that was, I had the normal 14-year-old pressures of, oh, well, my boobs aren't as big as that girl's boobs in the locker room. Like, I'm not, as far along as they are, and this constant comparison. And then you add on top of that, girls started spreading rumors about me at school, saying that I was a dyke and all of this. We don't want to change in front of her in the locker room. So it was really just impactful, but at the same time, I was just so pliable at that point that I don't think it had the same impact as when I was in college, because I felt like when I was in college, I should be a little bit more confident and a little bit more firm in who I was. And so to kind of have spent those years building this little, house of cards, right, for my confidence, and then having it just completely wiped away in, a number of therapy sessions was a lot more, devastating than when I was younger.
What do you think of Trump's Supreme Court nominees? Because you said you're a Republican. Obviously, you're a conservative. But these are also people who may not vote on the court in ways that benefit you personally. So what do you think?
So my approach to politics is maybe a little bit different than a lot of people. I don't vote for special interests. I obviously very much support equal rights, equal marriage. I would love to get married to a woman one day. That is my hope. Ultimately, I choose the politician that I think will be best for the country overall. Sometimes that aligns with my views and sometimes that doesn't. And I mean, if you look at who one of Trump's nominees is replacing, it was Scalia anyways, so it's not like that's going to be some great shift in the dynamic of the court. But that's a difficult one for me, I think, as far as resolving my personal views versus my political views. I do consider myself to be a Republican, but there are a number of issues that I do not agree with the Republican Party on. I always say I kind of fall in this like purple area because I'm not all red and I'm not all blue. And I think that most people actually do. That's something my girlfriend and I talk about a lot is, she considers herself to be liberal. I consider myself to be conservative. But if we sit down at a table kind of like me and you, we actually agree on more than we disagree on.
I think that's the case for most people. And I found that a lot when I worked at Fox, that obviously I was an outlier. I was a liberal. Most people there were conservatives. But when we would go out for drinks afterwards, maybe on issues like abortion, there's not much gray, right? Either you're pro-choice or you're pro-life. But on virtually, Emily, I can't think of other issues aside from abortion. Maybe the death penalty, obviously, either you're for it or you're against it. But except for decisions like that, I think most people are like that. I think the problem in our culture, tell me if you think I'm right, or maybe I'm not, is that people watch too much cable news or listen to too much talk radio, and they don't realize it's done to gin them up for the ratings and no other reason. And there's very few times that you can have conversations with Republicans. We've had a lot of Republicans on this podcast, a lot. Right. And I would bet you that we're probably one of the very few who actually have real conversations with them and don't just gin each other up for the purposes of...
It's true, because at the end of the day, every parent or every person wants what's a great education for their kids. And, one Republican may live in a school with great charter districts, whereas another one, or charter schools, where another one may not. So the argument is just listening and then perhaps finding what's the best part about charter schools that could be emulated. But when you don't sit and you don't have those conversations, that's when these vehement you can't even sit and have a conversation comes up.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that, that's obviously one of the things we first bonded over, Emily, was you found out I was conservative, I found out you were liberal, and we were like, let's discuss, what is it that we have in common? What is it that we don't have in common? And I think that I think that there's very few people in America who are truly 100% Democratic versus 100% Republican.
No question about it.
I really do. And I think the fact that our political system is so polarized only works to further divide our country. And that's really disappointing because, the nation's motto is e pluribus unum, out of many one. And unfortunately, I think we're moving away from that right now because we're all focused so much on our differences and what we don't have in common and how we can move to kind of bolster our own individual views. We're not looking at this as, hey, listen, we're one nation. So what can we do to grow together instead of growing apart? And I do agree, Republicans watch Fox and liberals watch C-SPAN, and that's just the way it is. And there's a real problem with that because they're both going to be slanted towards, like you said, gearing up their positions.
One thing, though, I found very striking was when someone you take is attacking your humanity and what you believe in and your personal happiness, your marriage, your way of life, it's then hard to have those kind of conversations. So how do you de-escalate it? I'm gay, and I think it's more important to talk to an audience who doesn't agree with you, to have that dialogue. But what do you say when people may be in that kind of very confrontational area?
Yeah, I think that at least getting back to kind of what we started with, which is religion, it's interesting when I tell people, there's two things. One, I think that we need to break down the assumptions that we have about each other, right? So you tell someone you work for Fox, naturally he assumes, oh, you're some conservative right-wing bigot, right? And I always tell people that I could introduce myself in 2 words and you could think you know everything about me. I could introduce myself as a Christian who's from the South, or I could introduce myself as a lesbian who lives in New York City. And just based on those two things, you would assume, oh, she's some liberal who voted for Hillary, or oh, she's some conservative who voted for Trump. And the thing is, I'm all of those four words right there and so much more. But we just are so quick to kind of put people in boxes because we want to understand people, categorize them, and be done with them. We don't actually want to learn who these individuals are, learn their stories, their experiences. And getting back to what I said about really the religious focus is what you just said, Emily, as far as speaking a message to an audience who may not be as receptive is really the message of the Bible, honestly. You know, we are called to go forth and minister to all the nations and all the world. That is the Great Commission. That was Christ's last directive, essentially, to his disciples, to his followers, to whoever. So if we're really, our mission as Christians or as, humans on this earth, whether that's religious or not, is to spread your message, who better to spread that to than people who have never heard it or people who disagree with it? How else are you going to really make an impact on the world?
But your message is not the same message that I would, and I'm not going to, again, I don't intend to single out the Falwells, but just because we're talking about liberty, it's not the same message that they would preach. They would say, go and put forth your message. The message is you're living a life of sin.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
So who gets to determine the message, I guess? In this evangelical, if you're using the word evangelical in its true sense, who's going to preach the good news, and what's the good news that you're going to preach to people who don't agree with you?
Yeah, I think that...
I say this as a Jew, by the way, so I'm going to stop right now because I obviously don't know much about this, but go ahead.
No, I think that, honestly, we're seeing a little bit of a trend in the church to... It used to be you would have a pastor who would stand on a pulpit and whatever he said, that was the gospel truth, okay? I think that we're reaching a point where it's falling more on the individual. People read the Bible or the Quran or whatever their religious text is, and they're receiving different messages or different truths really from those scriptures. And I do think we're seeing a lot more, I don't want to say flexibility, but maybe growth in the concept of spirituality over this religious dogma that we've seen for thousands of years now. So I do think that it is a more individual approach to either, again, whatever religion that you are. I have a Muslim friend who is very accepting of gay rights, gay marriage, whatever, just like I have Christian friends who are not in any way accepting of it. And I think that really focusing on your relationship with God, the universe, whatever it is that you identify as, is hopefully going to become more important than, like the song says, paraphrasing a book that was written 3,500 years ago.
What made you come back to God? Because you said you were angry, you didn't consider yourself a Christian. Was it when you started being more self-accepting about your sexual orientation?
I think it was. I think that... my anger with God was really my anger with myself. I was very much struggling with, of course, who I was, the life that I wanted to lead. Being a lesbian had always been portrayed to me as this kind of stereotypical, like super short hair, like more butch, I guess, typical gender roles. And realizing that I can be who I want, and I can be with who I want, and I can also hold that person's hand and walk into church, and anyone who wants to give me a dirty look can give me a dirty look, and I really don't care, had a lot to do with it, because I do identify a lot of my faith with my family, because I was raised in that home. To me, going to church isn't just going for God, it's going as a way to feel connected to my upbringing, to feel connected to my family, who I really don't have that much in common with at this point. It's a focal point of conversation when I do go home. So it's important for a lot more reasons, but I do think that that level of kind of acceptance and just self-recognition really had a lot to do with it. Just a peace, maybe, an inner peace with myself.
How is your family right now with you? Are they accepting it or at least living with it?
So for a long time, it was like a don't ask, don't tell policy. And then a few Thanksgivings ago, how many was that, Emily? Was that 2 Thanksgivings ago, I think? 2 Thanksgivings ago, because I think I called you like right after or something. I just sat my mom down and I was like, listen, this isn't going away. It's here. It's queer. It's going to stay. Not in so many words, but that's basically what I said. She cried and was concerned and also upset, disappointed, the word you never want to hear from a parent. And since then, she really hasn't mentioned it. It's kind of like she has this ostrich approach, and like that's kind of it. And that's something that I talk with. I go to therapy now regularly. Big mental health advocate, all for therapy. That's something that I'm kind of working through, is having those hard conversations of, listen, this is real. I'm going to bring a woman home one day. I'm going to spend my life with a woman if I can, find someone who would agree to that with me. And you're going to have to deal with it. But that's difficult. It's hard to go home and not feel welcomed in your home, which is currently how it feels. It's an uphill battle.
Again, I've seen kind of your transition of becoming more and more into yourself. So much so that you've started your side hustle, a brand, Gender Traitor.
Yes. So Gender Traitor is 1 year old.
Traitor, Trader, or Trai?
Trait.
Like a traitor to your cause.
Yeah, I was like, why can't I spell the name of my own business right now? Exactly.
Right.
I actually admittedly stole it from a Handmaid's Tale reference. People ask me that a lot. I was watching the show. That's what they call gay people, and I was like, I just would love to like harness that name. I did all of my legal research. It has not been trademarked, copyrighted until me, and I did that very quickly. It is a year old. On July 6th, I think, is its 1 year birthday. And it really just started as a blog, honestly. I just wanted an outlet to express kind of these things I was going through, whether that was with sexuality, whether it was with mental health overall, my family, anything. And then I wanted to really open it up to other people. I've always enjoyed writing. It's always been an outlet for me. It still is. And I wanted to open it up as a forum for other people who maybe didn't have that support at home, much like I didn't have the friend system, and at least a way to feel kind of connected. And I think that's something that is really easily done now in, I guess, the modern age with social media. So it started as a blog. It evolved quickly into kind of a clothing brand. I have t-shirts, we have snapbacks. I have an awesome graphic designer who just made a new logo for us, which is really cool. And we're actually going to be at World Pride in New York this year. Nice. We have a booth at Pride Fest, and we'll be selling all types of fun stuff and just, promoting the brand.
How do people find it? GenderTraitor.com? Or is there
so it's GenderTraitorShop.com.
Awesome.
Or we're on Instagram, again, Gender Traitor Shop, on Facebook, Twitter, all the things. You can find us. I think actually now if you Google Gender Traitor, we might be one of the first ones that comes up after like Handmaid's Tale references, of course. But it's definitely the SEO content is getting to the top of the list. So
I couldn't watch Handmaid's Tale. Did you watch it, Emily?
I did. That is something we might want to discuss.
Oh man,
I tried watching it,
or
I watched like 3 episodes, and it was too painful, and
it really is painful,
and I couldn't keep going.
There's really not an episode where you get up and you're like, wow.
I feel great.
Yeah, it's not like at least Game of Thrones. You get up after a couple episodes and you're like badass.
Except for the whole last season.
Oh yeah, we don't. Please, this is like the running
that didn't exist
theme of this entire podcast. The last 6 months has been
we don't exist.
How much we hate. The last season of
I'm not caught up on Handmaid's Tale actually, so no spoilers. But it's definitely a powerful show. For sure. So
yeah, I tried. I just couldn't. It was like I don't want to.
Not today.
Not today.
Today's been a heavy day in life.
Yeah. I'm like life is kind of heavy, and I don't really want to watch some woman getting raped by some guy for no reason other than to procreate. So I don't know. Listen, I got to tell you, as people who listen to this podcast know, obviously I have a 7-year-old son who's here today, actually, hiding out in a different part of this office, but he. I got to tell you, and Emily, you and I have talked about this a lot. If he came home and said that he's gay, I struggle with a scenario where I would care one way or the other, except for one thing that I think you mentioned, which is that I think in some parts of the country his life would be harder. And you don't want his life to be harder. But from my own perspective, couldn't care less.
I think also, I don't know if, I know you've heard about it because I shared it on my Instagram, but in London a few days ago, 2 lesbians were on a bus, and this group of men started harassing them, saying things like, "Oh, kiss, you guys are together, let's see it."
Because that's every straight guy's dream,
Oh, yeah, absolutely, because we're here for your entertainment, naturally. And and they actually ended up beating up the couple and robbing them. One of them shared a photo of them just completely bloodied on her Facebook, and it's gotten this kind of international recognition.
And it's in London itself?
In London,
that's shocking.
Yeah, and it's crazy. And it happened on May 31st, so right on the eve of Pride, and it's shocking and it's surprising, but at the same time, it's not. Here we are, it's World Pride, there's pride flags flying all over. Lord knows the corporations have taken a hold of it and are squeezing every ounce they can out of the rainbow flag. Whichever side you fall on that, that's fine. But it is still happening. I'll walk with my girlfriend, and I'm sure that's something you've experienced too, Emily. I'll walk with my girlfriend down the street. We're holding hands, just going about our day. And here comes guys following us down the street. "Oh, hey, that's how you roll. Let's see it. Give her a kiss. Yeah, come here. I can straighten you out." And it's just crazy that in 2019, as far as we've moved forward, we're still so far backwards in so many ways. So we still have a long way to go before a true equality is reached.
That's what I don't get. First of all, I get the whole guy fantasy because that's been a guy fantasy in perpetuity. But what I don't get is why anybody cares what you do behind closed doors. Like, who cares? Do you care who I'm with? Like, why do I care who you're with? Other than if this woman makes you happy or this man makes me happy, it doesn't really matter. No. That's what I don't get about a whole variety of these things. And I'm taking religion out of the equation because obviously people have very deeply held religious views that tell them differently. But if religion is not your bag, why do you care? Who cares? I mean, who cares?
That's interesting too. I don't know if what you're familiar with the Bowers v. Hardwick case, which was reversed with Lawrence v. Texas, which is a big landmark case for gay rights.
For the sodomy case.
Yeah, so Bowers v. Hardwick, actually, the facts of that case are really interesting because these 2 men were found in their home, in bed together. So someone literally came and, basically busted down the door like it's V for Vendetta or something, and then arrested them for sodomy. So it really is this kind of crazy concept of this is my home, this is my my castle, if you will, this is my safe place. And even that is still, obviously there's been so much progress since then, but still that concept of what we do in our homes is everybody else's business, but what other people do in their homes is totally fine.
But here's what's interesting, is that sodomy related to that case? Was it just 2 men? Or if this was, would the law apply, was there a blanket sodomy ban if this were a man and a woman?
Yeah, so that's actually a point I tongue-in-cheek, I guess, brought up in law school. I said, oh, okay, well, I guess lesbian activity is totally fine then, because it didn't have to do with sodomy. And that's absolutely was the case legally. It only related to sodomy, had nothing to do with women, and even a lot of references that you find in the Bible refer strictly to sodomy. So again, I kind of almost joke about it. I'm like, oh, well, see, being a lesbian is totally fine. Obviously, Well,
of course, because the Bible is written by men, and we all know men love nothing more than the scenario of 2 women together. But keep going.
No, yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the point, but obviously lesbians still very much being discriminated against at that time. If not, if it wasn't codified, it was certainly de facto the case and still is the case.
Do you think that, this is a question for both of you, do you think it's harder to be a lesbian in 2019 or to be a gay man in terms of your rights being abrogated?
Oh, I don't know if I could answer that, honestly. I honestly don't have a lot of gay male friends to have understood their experiences or what they've gone through. So I would definitely not feel comfortable opining on that one.
I think being a woman, I feel more hypersexualized being gay, because I feel also as a woman that you have to prove sometimes that you're smart if you're attractive. I don't know, Julie, maybe you've had to deal with this. Like,
but that's not a gay or straight thing. I think generally if you're an attractive woman.
Hyper sexualizes it. Not only are you an attractive woman or a woman, but who's already sexualized, but then you have the gay thing into it, and it's just exponential.
So I think I will say one thing, and maybe this is indicative of my answer before I even say it. I think that there is more of a fantasy around, like you said, two women being together as opposed to two men being together. Like I said, I walk down the street, I'm holding hands with my girlfriend. It's almost this attractive, oh, we want to see more, right? You see two men walking down the street and it's, oh, gross, fag, you know, all of these like kind of...
pejorative.
Yeah, exactly. It's never really seen in this desirable, I should say, light, as opposed to, you know, two women. Good Lord, look at the porn industry, for crying out loud. How often do you see like, oh, threesome, two women?
Oh no, by the
crazy.
way, you raise an interesting point. I don't know how I know the statistic, but I read it somewhere. I think the number one search on porn sites is lesbian sex. And that's not lesbian women searching clearly for other lesbian women. It's clearly not. So it's interesting how you're absolutely right. And Emily, you raised a great point. The whole notion of being a lesbian, I think, is hypersexualized, not by other lesbians, but hypersexualized mainly by men.
Right, and then I think
straight men. Oh no question, straight men. Yeah, gay men. The gay men couldn't care less about you guys.
Right? No,
I'm friends with a lot of gay guys. Trust me, they're not searching for lesbian sex.
And honestly, lesbians couldn't care less.
Yeah,
about
exactly
lesbian
right.
Porn. Like,
right.
let's just be honest.
Right, but it's then also it goes just into the fear of being taken seriously in work and in that, which is always how I've defined my success in work, and then so. Being a fear of not being taken seriously is just another thing added on to it.
Yeah.
Which has been tough for me.
No, I totally agree. It's kind of a joke when I go to work, I'll usually wear a button-down shirt, you know, some dress pants, little like Oxford shoes. Sometimes I'll wear a tie, like very tomboy kind of dress. And when I have a trial, for example, I'll immediately put on a dress and heels. Why? Because I don't want to potentially offend a member of the jury who would assume my sexuality. And there is still that kind of, I don't want to say pressure, but maybe stigma associated with, well, she's a lesbian, so let's just, again, assume we know everything about her. Well, I don't like that lifestyle, so I'm not going to like her as a lawyer. So it's almost this expectation of, or almost like I'm on a show. Like, okay, I've got to put on the dog and pony show for the jury, make sure I look pretty, do my makeup, do my hair, wear the heels that are going to kill my feet by the end of the day, and the dress that's too tight.
God, I can relate to that.
Yeah,
having been
it's
at
terrible.
Fox for a long time. The whole thing to me that's so striking as you guys are talking about this is you have to essentially change your entire persona or try to feminize it, I guess, is the way you just described it, although you're just as feminine as any other woman out there. But all to do with something that has nothing to do with anybody's life. This is what you do behind closed doors. So the fact that the aspect of your professional life, not your social life in a romantic sense, but your life outside the bedroom is subsumed by something that really only takes place inside the bedroom. It's kind of ridiculous.
Crazy.
It's crazy. I mean, think about that. It's crazy that we're spending time in 2019 talking about having to adjust your life in any way, shape, or form in ways that are not meaningful to anybody who you're not spending quality time with in your bedroom. I had a very good friend. I still have a very good friend who actually he's gay. He got engaged yesterday, as a matter of fact, to his boyfriend, my friend Ben. Emily, I think you've met him. Yeah, it was
Congrats,
great.
Ben.
Yes, it was a great engagement party, Ben. But Ben came out to me, and I think I was the first person he came out to. He's almost like my little brother, and I've known him. He interned for me when I worked in the Senate, so I think I've known him since he was in college, and he's now almost 40. But he came out to me, I want to say like a decade ago, and he sat down with me, and I remember he was kind of almost hostile about it. He goes, I just want you to know something along the lines of like, you know, I'm never going to marry a woman. I think that's how he presented it. And I said, yeah, I know. And he's like, do you know what I'm saying to you? I'm like, yeah, I get it. And he was like offended. And I kind of don't blame him because to me, I was like, listen, like, and I'm not going to marry a woman either. I'm going to marry a guy, and you're going to marry a guy, and it's all going to be good. And I think he thought I kind of was dismissing the import of what he was saying, whereas in fact I was saying, what do I care who you sleep with? But I now understand in retrospect why he was upset, and it's exactly what we're talking about. It subsumes your entire life in a way that my sexuality doesn't, right? Like, I don't wake up every morning trying to exude something. Like, I'm a straight woman, and then I, go home to my boyfriend, and then that's nobody's business as to what we do or don't do. But you guys actually have to live a very different life where this is your entire life because people have made it that way, not because you've made it that way, right?
It is, and is the outfit I pick out going to look too gay? Or it's like, also, am I going to come out to this person today? Yeah. Or things like that you keep have at the back of your head that are always there.
Absolutely. Well, it's so funny you say that because I literally texted Emily when I was coming here, and I said, I look so gay today. Well,
I don't even know what that means, but I think you look beautiful today.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But and those are synonymous things. That,
they are.
Yeah. Thank you. But it's just very much like how I dress, maybe when I'm hanging out with you or going to a pride event or whatever, versus how I dress when I go to court, versus how I dress when I go home. I literally, before I go home, I have to do this kind of like run through of my wardrobe of, does this look too gay? Does this look too gay? Does this look too gay? And it's insane. You're never going to have a straight woman who's like, do I look like I like men today? Like, it's
but that's my whole
never
point.
going to happen.
You're so right. Like, I don't spend one iota of my day thinking, do I look straight today?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Or frankly, in the way that I'm dressed right now, if people could see this, I think I'm homeless. Like, I jumped out of the shower, didn't even blow dry my hair. I'm dripping wet hair, and my jeans have 20 holes in them, and I'm wearing Stan Smiths, I think from 1988. It's trendy. But it's trendy now. Yeah. But trust me, I wore Stan Smiths before hipsters were alive, my friend. But I wore them when they were tennis shoes. When I tried to play tennis, which I never will do in front of Emily. But so. You're absolutely right, and I don't ever think about what I look like when I go home, other than my parents constantly tell me that I need to take better care of myself. But other than that, I mean, it's just not. It's not. Straight people don't have these issues, and I think anybody who's listening who is straight themselves and doesn't maybe know gay people or ever experience what gay people go through. This is like a whole thing that most people I think all people who are straight never have to contend with.
But I think, Julie, you brought up a good point. Just people who are not gay or may not have gay friends, just being a strong ally. And Julie, you have always been someone who I feel safe with and trust.
Of course. Thank you.
But I think that's also important because most of the world isn't gay. But being an ally, just being open and empathetic.
Yeah, no, I agree. One of my... I don't want to say one of my few straight friends, but honestly, most of my friends at this point are lesbians. Mm-hmm. And I don't know whether that's been an intentional choice or just the way the, rainbow cookies have crumbled.
Right.
But one of my straight friends literally yesterday said, well, I don't understand, why is there a gay pride month? There's not a straight pride month.
Really?
And I was like, what? Like, my brain exploded. And I was like, dude, we're never going to agree on this. Every single day is straight pride day. Like, every day that you wake up, you are the default, and you don't have to, kind of check the box that's marked other under sexuality in your mind. And this is our 1 month out of the year where we feel like we are the majority and we are the norm, and we can put the rainbow band on our Apple Watch or wear the snapback or wave the flag or hang the flag on our fire escape like I have and feel accepted. Even in a liberal, accepting, tolerant, whatever you want to call it, city like New York, you are still the minority, and you feel it every second of every day that you walk down the street.
And I think that's how a lot of my African-American friends who are raising kids here in New York, I had this conversation with one of my son's best friends in school. He just finished first grade, is a little African-American boy, and his mom and I... Emily, we have a house up in Massachusetts that we sometimes use as a ski house. They went skiing with us over spring break, the mom and her little boy. And we sent the kids off to ski school, and then the mom and I decided to get a few drinks, and it turned into a day of debauchery. But as it should when you have 2 7-year-old boys that you're trying to offload. But So one of the things that she said after a few drinks, and she's so right, is she said, I have to worry about my son, at the time I think he was 6, my little boy, leaving the house every day and having to contend with, as he gets older, the police looking at him in skeptical ways that they wouldn't look at your little blonde boy. And I have to tell him to always be respectful to the cops, and I have to tell him to always be, extra respectful to law enforcement, because if he's not, he's going to be assumed to be a criminal in ways that my son, who's blonde, would not be. And she's so right. And it's something that I don't ever have the talk with my son about. Like, I don't wake up in the morning and say, listen, almost from birth, if you see cops, just be extra respectful, because if you're not, something might happen to you. Yeah. Emily, I don't remember if you were working on Outnumbered when this particular episode aired, but when Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York, who I don't like, but at all, and he sucks, and please come back to New York and fix it rather than running for president, Mr. Mayor. But when he was talking about his son Dante and how he had to sit down with his son Dante because Dante's mother is black and de Blasio is obviously white, and had to talk to de Blasio about how, to his son Dante, about how he had to be extra respectful to the cops. I remember we talked about this on Outnumbered, and everybody went ballistic. Oh my God, why is he using this as a racial thing? And why is he doing this? And I said, listen, I have a son. At the time, my son, I think, was 2 or 3. This is a discussion I never have to have with him. And it's a lot of what you guys are saying, that African Americans and other minorities have to leave the house constantly being aware that they are potentially singled out for their race. Mm-hmm. You guys have to leave the house every single day constantly aware that you might be singled out for your sexuality. As a white woman who's straight, I don't ever have those kinds of concerns. Yeah. And that's a lot for you guys to carry. That's a lot for anybody to carry constantly. It's like an extra boulder you have to carry. And I think most people who are not gay or don't have gay friends may not realize what a hassle that is every single day.
Yeah. And I think the one, well, obviously there's, of course, differences historically and otherwise associated with racial discrimination,
well, sure,
sexual discrimination, whatever.
People see your race before they see your orientation.
Yeah, and that's my point too, is we also have, I guess, not to make one greater or lesser than the other, but we have the unique burden of essentially coming out to everyone we meet, mm-hmm. right? Because straight is the default. And unless I'm walking around wearing a dress made of rainbows, when you see me, you might not assume that I'm a lesbian. So I'll have guys hit on me, or guys ask for my number or whatever. They'll send me like a message on Instagram, and I'm like, listen, like, I'm flattered, but I'm gay. And they're like, oh.
Even better.
Really? Yeah.
Bring your girlfriend
that's
over.
Fine. And I'm like, no, like, I don't want to do this. If I'm an African-American woman, I'm an African-American woman. Right. You can see that I'm an African-American woman. I don't have to tell you, by the way, I'm black. As a lesbian, you do. Every single person. And whether that's by slipping in the fact like, oh yeah, my girlfriend and I like this Broadway show, or, hey, listen, dude, I'm gay. However you choose to do it, you constantly have to do it to everyone,
But do you have to do that to people who are not hitting on you? Like, do you have to do that? So Emily and I knew each other for a very long time before she actually told me that she was gay. Did you have to do that? I mean, I think you told me because you wanted me to meet your girlfriend. I mean, there were reasons why you told me, but the point is, I don't ever have to go around being like, oh yeah, P.S. I'm straight. I might be like, hey, Emily, I want you to meet my boyfriend, but that's different than having to affirmatively declare what I do behind closed doors and with whom I do it.
Well, I first think it's feeling out for me as a security thing is, am I safe telling somebody? Or what are their biases? Mm-hmm. Because if I know this person is biased or something like that, it's testing the waters. And then it's also, I genuinely wanted to be your friend. And you can't really be someone's friend if you give them half-truths, mm-hmm. and you live half-lives. Because if I'm only telling you about half and the issues of my day, we only know each other on a surface level. I definitely think, Julie, you and I know each other deeper than that. And
that's
there's
for sure. Yep.
No way we could get there if I was only half of me and so guarded. Because I think the beginning when I first do know people, it's first like, do you trust my work? Do you trust me? All these different things that I'm like, security-wise, I'm good. Okay. She doesn't have any biases. Okay, I'm good. She's not going to be uncomfortable with me being me. I'm good. It's just this checklist in my head where it's kind of exhausting, but then it's like the people who I am close to, I am extremely loyal. I've felt this way, but it's not easy because.
Yeah, in case you raise a good point that This is something you affirmatively have to do, which virtually nobody else does. If it's not gay men have to do it, and lesbians have to do it, but I don't know. You're absolutely right. African American women or anybody else don't have to affirmatively tell you who they are. People can see it.
Yeah.
Which makes it harder for them in some ways, because obviously they can't hide against bigots in ways that other people can. But it's also exhausting, I would think.
It is. And I think, there is something to be said. Yes, what defines, I guess, a lesbian, a gay man, whatever, bisexual, it is really, of course, technically what goes on behind closed doors, but at the same time, it's not, because it is a lifestyle. It is who we are to the core of our being. And I feel that every time that I go home, right? Because I can think, oh, that is what I do behind closed doors, and that's nobody's business and whatever. But even down to jokes, the dialogue, shows that we watch, characters that we like, I can't go home and be like, oh my gosh, that girl looks just like Dana from The L Word. People will be like, what are you even talking about? Or, I can't have the same kind of connection that I have with people that are in the LGBTQ community. And so, yes, it is technically, it's nobody's business. It's what we do behind closed doors. But at the same time, it's so much more than that. And I think that that becomes very difficult when you can't just be honest with who you are with everyone.
That we don't have time for this conversation, but you raise an interesting point, which is how much of your sexuality is just about sex and how much of your sexuality is the core of who you are and defines everything about you. And I've never given that any thought as a straight woman to myself. But I assume that if you're in the situation that you're in, especially having grown up, Kacey, the way you grew up, that it's probably a lot more than just your sexuality, right? It's just about sex.
No, it's not just about sex.
Yeah, exactly right.
No, that's great too. But.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
This is honestly, I think, the most fascinating podcast I've ever done. Thank you for joining us.
Part 2.
We'll definitely have a part 2 for sure. Definitely. I want to do that.
Thank you guys for having me.
Happy Pride, everybody.
Happy Pride, everybody.
Happy Pride.
Come to World Pride. Come see me.
Definitely.
Julie, I very much enjoyed what just happened.
We just had an absolutely amazing chat with your friend, Kacey, who hopefully now is my friend, Kacey, but just a great conversation. Kacey is a lesbian. Happy Pride, everybody. Kacey grew up as an evangelical Christian. She's a graduate of Liberty University and Liberty Law School. She still considers herself a strong Christian and a conservative. It was just a lovely conversation. I hope more people have conversations like this, because you may find that you agree more than you disagree with people in politics when you talk to people who are not of your views.
And, having this conversation and showing that being religious and being gay they're not mutually exclusive is something I think is really important to hear. And just to be able to have the conversation that we did is something I think that can be emulated across the country.
I really hope more people do. And I think, as we talked about during our conversation, unfortunately, our political discourse is skewed towards 140 characters or whatever it is on Twitter, where you can't really have nuance. Or cable news, where you just have shout fests, and you specifically have to find people who are diametrically opposed to each other to argue and debate, or talk radio, which really is off the hook. Very few conversations where people actually just have discussions for the sake of having discussions, and I hope that more people have those kinds of discussions, and I hope more people understand that you can't have 100% of... You'll never find anybody you agree with 100%, but if the person is a good person, and you share different views, as long as you are not a discriminatory bigot, there's no reason why people can't be friends.
Well, that gets me right into what I'm salty about this week. The Catholic Church spent $10.6 million to lobby against legislation that would benefit victims of child sex abuse. So all these victims of clergy who have been sexually abused, the Catholic Church has been lobbying and has spent, in a new report, found over $10.6 million to lobby against this legislation. For example, the legislation in New York that passed on February 14th, the Child Victims Act, which increased the age at which the victims are able to sue from 23 to 55. The Catholic Church spent almost $3 million lobbying against that. So that is making me extremely salty, but it also, being raised Catholic, it also just is just another example of the hypocrisy in the Catholic Church.
Well, I have this policy of not criticizing religions that are not my own, so I'm not Catholic, so I'm going to withhold my views on what you said, other than to say the following. I generally think that if you are an entity that preaches morality and tells people how they should live their lives, and you're didactic, which is really the definition of what all faiths are for the most part. I shouldn't speak to all faiths, but all three major religions. You probably should, and especially if you claim to walk in the footsteps of Jesus Christ, you probably should emulate him. And I truly, and this goes for I'm Jewish, this goes for my religion as well, because certainly this happens in Jewish communities as well as Catholic and other Christian denominations. Why are you protecting pedophiles? I mean, there's under no circumstances is this acceptable. I don't care what your reading of scripture is. It's just not acceptable. I mean, these are the most vulnerable, and I don't want to start quoting Jesus about protecting the most vulnerable among us, but because I'm not qualified to. But I mean, these are kids,
right?
And I get that you don't want to bankrupt. You know, I was somewhat involved in similar legislation in New Jersey to extend the statute of limitations, and not just for the church, but for other entities as well, on child sex abuse. And what I don't understand is, I get the church and other entities are worried that they're going to be bankrupt if people keep suing them for this. I completely get it. On the other hand, you are a moral institution, and your job is to preach morality. And I would think that the quest for the almighty dollar is not as important as protecting and making right the victims of child abuse, a lot of whom have committed suicide or have had lifelong psychological problems based on the fact that they were abused by a priest or by a rabbi or by an imam or by, their next door neighbor.
Well, the church has always, I feel, been out for itself. I was a history major in college, and one of the stories that always stuck out to me about the Catholic Church was why Catholic priests can't get married. And it was actually because Catholic priests were at first allowed to marry.
Council of Nicaea is when they adopted all this stuff, I want to say,
right,
like in 300 something.
But it was when the church was losing so much land because priests, when they died, it was going to their families and not back into the church. And the church was concerned that they weren't getting this land back. So then it becomes part of the word that priests can't get married. So it's simply to retain land.
Well, and then you have popes in the Middle Ages, like the Borgias, or during the Renaissance, who had multiple children and made their children huge landowners. And Cesar Borgia, who was the son of a pope, was a huge battle commander and control. I mean, it's pretty interesting to me how things have evolved. Again, not for me to discuss or criticize somebody else's religion, simply just to say, if you're a human being, I don't care if you are wearing a collar or you're not, staying away from little kids is definitely the wise thing to do. And if you have abused that, then you deserve to be brought to justice, and not just defrocked and not just moved from one parish to another or from one school to another, but prosecuted under the law like anybody else would be.
I will say an amen to that.
Thank you. I'm going to tell you what makes me salty. And before anybody starts tweeting me about how dare I go after the president's children, they are not children. They are all adults who are approaching 40, some of whom are over 40. Why the hell were Donald Trump's children at Buckingham Palace? Especially the ones who don't work at the White House. Like, why was Junior there? And why was Eric there, who are working for the Trump organization and have nothing whatsoever to do with the government?
They're doing it all for the Insta.
I mean, no, they're doing it because they want to hang out. I mean, it's like, I get it. Like, they want to hang out with the royalty. Right. I understand. Everybody wants to hang out with Kate and William. But why were they there? Why was Tiffany Trump there? And it's not that I have anything personally against her. I just think it's a bad look, unless anybody says, well, Malia Obama and Sasha Obama accompanied the president.
Different, right?
Different. They were minor children who were living at the White House. I don't even have a problem with Ivanka and that dope Jared doing it because they work at the White House. But why were private citizens hanging out at Buckingham Palace? Are we trying to pretend that they're some sort of American royal family? I mean, it's the whole thing drives me. The nepotism in this administration drives me up the wall. It's insane, and it needs to stop. And I feel bad for the Queen because I'm sure she was like, well, I can't believe I have to hang out with this orange marmalade dope, and his children. And this whole family just drives me nuts. I can't wait for them to go, all of them.
Yeah, I concur. I think they're doing it all for likes on social media.
No, it's like the experience. Like, okay, it's, you
Right.
know, it's like, wow, okay, we get to hang
I
out with the
just-
royal family. Like, look at us. We get to hang out with the royal family. And it's not like I'm a huge fan of the royal family. I really couldn't care less about them one way or the other. I just don't understand when there's a state visit that you're making why your adult children who work for a private corporation that does business in said country, as in they own a golf course in Scotland, why they get to go. And on that note, by the way, did you see Trump saying to the Prime Minister of Ireland, do you know about walls? Do you guys have walls here? You really should build a wall. Like, does this guy not know anything about the history of Northern Ireland and Ireland?
No, he does not.
Like, is he the only person? Is he the only living person who lived through the quote unquote troubles, in the latter part of, or not just the latter part of, basically throughout the 20th century, who doesn't understand when you talk about the Irish, you're talking about walls, especially now during Brexit, when you have Northern Ireland Brexiting as part of the UK, but the rest of Ireland remaining as part of the EU. What that means for a nation that has been riven historically.
War-torn, right.
I mean, war-torn, going back to William of Orange, prior to William of Orange. I mean, I don't want to get into the whole British/Irish history class here. And also, now that we're on a salty thing, one last thing, and then I'll stop, I promise. I actually didn't know what made me salty, but now it's a lot of things coming out. It's like a therapy session. When you're abroad, and this actually applies not just to Trump, Obama did this, I didn't like it either. I hate when politicians do this. Politics stop at the water's edge. When you are representing our country abroad, stop trashing your political opponents back here at home. And again, I'm not blaming Trump for this solely. Obama did it. I think Biden did it. I just don't like it. I don't like it at all. If you're abroad, just stop. We're all Americans when the minute you set foot outside of this country. So stop trashing Nancy Pelosi when you're sitting in front of the American cemetery in Normandy, in front of the people that died to free Europe and to save the world from Nazism. I mean, don't trash Nancy Pelosi, Mr. President, when you're sitting literally in front of white marble crosses on hallowed ground where Americans died fighting Nazis. So, on that note, happy Pride, everybody.
A woman to all of that.
All right, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.